All right. Welcome to the first legit episode of what I'm going to call Informed Discretion. Um, for those of you that didn't see my test broadcast, I'll tell you a little bit about this and then we'll get to it. Um, Real quick, what is this and why am I doing it? It's a podcast, silly. Um, I'm doing it because this is basically the new radio. I grew up listening to talk radio, uh, stuff like Paul Harvey um, and Art Bell was a huge influence on me. Bill Cooper. Um, I always wanted to do it, and basically the internet says I can, so I'm gonna. And so, where does the name Informed Discretion come from? It comes from a Thomas Jefferson quote. In his letter of September 28th, 1820, to his buddy William Charles Jarvis, Thomas Jefferson said, I know no safe depository of the ultimate powers of the society but the people themselves. And if we think them not enlightened enough to exercise their control with a wholesome discretion, the remedy is not to take it from them, but to inform their discretion by education. So yeah, that's where the name comes from, and I'm rolling with that. So what am I going to talk about? I'm going to talk about politics, current events mostly, some philosophy, societal, whatnot. Um, I'm also probably going to talk about my hobbies and interests, things like guns and motorbikes and heavy metal music and stuff like that. And who is my audience? Well, anybody who will listen, really. It's really not geared specifically for anybody. I don't consider myself right wing or left wing or any of that stuff. This is just what I'm going to talk about. Hey, I got a microphone, no turntables, and a microphone. I'm going to talk about stuff that I see going on in the world, and yeah, why don't we get to that? So, welcome to the first legit episode of Informed Discretion. Today is Thursday, September 21st. It's about a quarter to 8 p.m. Pacific. And what's been going on this week, huh? Well, I've got a list of stuff here, some notes. Let's talk about it. Well, I'll talk about it. You'll you'll hopefully listen, and who knows? Maybe we'll get like Skype callers or something in the future once I know what I'm doing. So, probably some of the big news was Trump had his speech there at the United Nations, the Great Orange One, talking about the Norks and their uh, nuclear program, and we're going to destroy them, and got to have that endless war going. You know, the profit margins on these missiles and these systems, profit margins are pretty high, and you got to line those pockets. It's coming up on CEO bonus time, so we need to make those guys feel like they're doing something, right? I don't really think that North Korea is that big of a deal, honestly. Um, I I figure the way we empirically go out and force our rule all over the globe, I think people, um, if I was in a country that was not America, I think it would be in my country's best interest to be nuclear capable also. I can't fault them for that. Um, Everything that we know about the North Korean regime we get from the mainstream media. So how much of it can we really trust, you know? I I don't know. I really don't. So there's that. He's also he's conflating the North Koreans with Iran, which I think is pretty silly because Iran has been shown to be living up to their part of their nuclear deal with us, and I think it's kind of wrong for that conflation to be applied. Iran was a pretty progressive country until they disagreed with us. We went in, we used the CIA to have a religious revolution in their country, and now it's a hellhole. Um, it's probably not that. I mean, it's probably really no worse than say. Well, it probably is worse than Syria. Syria is pretty Western. Um, but speaking of Syria, he wants to remove Bashar al-Assad, because you know the guy's a dentist. He's not a tyrant. Um, this whole thing about um, this gas attack. You can go on YouTube and you can see the behind the scenes for this propaganda that they show on the news, and once they get their footage, the people lying on the ground get up. They know. I mean, they're alive. Uh, what does the director say? Cut. He says cut. They get up. They go have coffee or chai tea or whatever they have. I don't believe that gas attack on his own people has any legitimacy whatsoever. That happened right at the time when Russia came in and started kicking ISIS's asses. And, we were having such a hard time. I wonder why that is. Well, Russia comes in, they clean up, and then we find out, I don't know if it was this week or last week, the Pentagon has been shown to be funneling billions of dollars to buy Soviet-era weapons so they can give them to the rebels and to ISIS. Your right-wing folks are going to say, "Oh, well, Obama is the founder of ISIS." Well, that's a stretch, okay. But the fact is that that Cold War was a bitch, and we armed the Mujahideen against the Russians, and the Mujahideen in Afghanistan became the Taliban and became Al Qaeda. And another thing, it can easily be shown that the Taliban stopped almost all opium growth in Afghanistan. But I'll tell you what, it's skyrocketed now that we're back. I'm sorry, I'm getting off here. Back to Syria. Syria doing really good despite the fact that we're arming the rebels, quote unquote moderate rebels. Thanks a lot, John McCain, you jerk. The Syrian army has advanced all the way to the east bank of the Euphrates River, which is pretty significant. They're taking their country back, or at least they were until today. A couple hours ago, I just saw Israel has bombed a Damascus airport. Thanks a lot, Israel. That's real freaking nice of you. Way to go. Why all this is happening. If you don't know why all this is happening, I'll tell you. Competing oil pipelines. Yeah, it's always about the oil. We want to put oil pipeline in. The Russians want to put an oil pipeline in. Won't somebody think of the profits, right? Once again. So, yeah, that's what's going on with Trump's speech. Yeah, let's see. Speaking of Trump, Morgan Freeman. Morgan Freeman is saying he's just put out a public service announcement about the boogeyman. Remember back in the 80s, late 70s, the Russians, that Cold War thing, the Russians were the boogeyman. Well, for some reason, now that they're not communist anymore, they're the boogeyman again. There's no evidence for any Russian hacking. There's plenty of evidence for our CIA overthrowing and meddling in something like 80 something elections throughout the world since its inception. But Morgan Freeman is now the new poster boy for investigaterussia.org, because the big bad boogeyman, the bear, meddled in our elections. Let me tell you something about this investigaterussia.org. You can go to their website. It's pretty easy to find their advisory board. Who's on the advisory board? It's a bunch of jerks. You got Max Boot. Max Boot is a neocon jerkwad, part of the Partnership for the New American Century. You got Norman Ornstein from American Enterprise Institute, which is like a precursor for the PNAC, the Partnership for a New American Century. These are the guys who wanted us to have another Pearl Harbor. And they got it with their 9/11. James Clapper. You remember James Clapper? He's on that advisory board. He was the director of national intelligence. And he perjured the hell out of himself in front of Congress about bulk data collection on Americans. What a jerk. Thank you, Edward Snowden, for turning the light onto that one. So jerks in charge of that. Thanks a lot, Morgan Freeman. You played God in a movie or two, so that gives you a whole lot of credibility with the youth of today, who just seem to love pop culture so much more than reality. Okay, what else have we got here? Let's see. Oh, there was the big quake in Mexico. Mexico City had an earthquake. Another one. Not the one from before, another one. A buttload of people died. When I wrote this note down, it was 104. I think it might be closer to 200 now. Buildings fell down. A volcano erupted as a result of this. It's gnarly over there. You do not want to be in Mexico City right now. Let's see. You got Spain. You know how Catalonia wants to have a referendum, become an independent state, want to separate from Spain? Well, the Spanish police are going around arresting high-ranking government officials in Catalonia for their support to the referendum for independence. There's no free speech. There's no right to self-determination over there, not in the EU. And if you know anything about that, won't somebody think of the profits? Brussels wants their money. And if you're not in the EU, Brussels ain't getting their money. It's like the mafia. Remember Goodfellas? F you, pay me. Let's see. Oh, here's a really good one. So the CIA files set to be released October 26th. That's just over a month away. On Lee Harvey Oswald under the Kennedy Assassination Records Collection Act of 1992 have gone missing. Big surprise there, right? We totally thought that the government was going to tell us what happened. So, previous release in July showed us some very interesting stuff about that. We already know that Lee Harvey Oswald was a CIA asset. That's been proven. In July, it was shown that the mayor of Dallas, Earl Cabell, and his brother Charles, also CIA assets. I'll tell you what, folks, the Central Intelligence Agency is, it's nuts, man. It's nuts what's going on with them and has gone on with them. People talk about the deep state. You know, there was a time before the election, you know, conspiracy theorists talked about the deep state. It was an idea. And then all of a sudden, the deep state became something acknowledged by the mainstream media. It blew my mind when that started happening, because during the Warren Commission to figure out what happened, well, the Warren Commission to figure out what happened to Kennedy, or should I say, to cover up what happened to Kennedy, the CIA had a campaign to go around discrediting and using the phrase conspiracy theorist as a derision against people who didn't believe the official narrative of things. And it's stuck around until today. Like, the word conspiracy itself has a negative connotation. Well, you know, a conspiracy is just when two people get together to do something illegal secretly. If you think that's never happened, then you're a moron. It happens all the time. It happens in government. I'm sorry. Let me get back on track here. In July, there was this release, and we found out that the mayor and his brother of Dallas were CIA assets. And then his independent investigator, Malcolm Blunt, came out with this revelation. And here, I'll just give you a quote from him. This huge search by CIA did not surface Oswald's security files, and the Assassination Records Review Board remained uninformed about their existence. Talking about these files that were supposed to be released in October. Not until 1997, when an ARRB staffer stumbled across evidence that two previous congressional investigations had access to these files, did the CIA discover them. Yeah. We can totally trust the CIA. So what happens is the ARRB, the Assassination Records Review Board, they eventually got a 7-volume set of documents on Oswald in 1998. But volume 5 was missing. No volume 5. And they gave the excuse that, oh, well, it must have been consolidated into volume 4, or maybe volume 6. Well, why would, where's volume 5? Where is it? If it was consolidated, why isn't it a 6 volume set, right? So, you know, I mean, if you thought we were going to get anything out of the government, you're kidding yourself. But that was in the news this week. Let's see what else. You had these Georgia Tech riots. So, what I understand happened in Georgia, at Georgia Tech, obviously, you had a gender non-binary person waving a knife around, called the cops on themselves, waves a knife around, says, shoot me. Got close enough that the cops shot this person. So, you know, memorials happened. Memorials turned into protests. Protests turned into riots and marches. And I read a couple of places that you know, the student body was saying these are not students that are doing this. These are outside actors that are causing, well, not causing, but perpetrating this violence. Apparently, I'm sure that some of the students were doing it too. I mean, you know, you get pissed off. You see what cops have been doing to people lately. You know, I've seen some pretty gnarly stuff. Some of it is justified, and a lot of it is absolutely not. I wasn't there for this, but I do know that, you know, this march / riot went to a police station and set a squad car on fire in violent protest of this happening. And what they didn't know was this gender non-binary person, I forget their name, no surprise, had a long history of depression, left a suicide note in their dorm. It was suicide by cop. They got what they wanted. I'm not saying it's not tragic, but it was deliberate. And it's sad. Let's see, what else have we got? Comcast and AT&T are paying minority groups to support killing net neutrality. I believe I saw this on Tech Dirt. I really need to start making notes and keeping the links to all this stuff so you can see I'm not getting it from douchebags like Alex Jones. I believe I got this from Tech Dirt or Tech Crunch. But you know, here's a clip from the article. You'll see minority coalitions like the Hispanic Technology and Telecommunications Partnership supporting awful mergers or opposing consumer-centric policies like more cable box competition or net neutrality. Well, that sucks. I think net neutrality is kind of a red herring buzzword, because I don't necessarily want the government in charge of things, but I don't want corporations in charge of things either. That's fascism. Okay, here we go. So the definition of fascism has changed. Everybody, Antifa, everybody's out talking about you're a fascist. This guy's a fascist. What a fascist. Fascism had a meaning, and it's been recently changed. Google's definition of fascism is an authoritarian and nationalistic right-wing system of government and social organization. Well, you can be a left-wing fascist too. They're leaving out the important part of severe economic and social regimentation that was originally in the definition. I understand it's a living language and all this stuff, but I'll tell you what, when literally has literally become figuratively, it's language is useless at that point. What I'm trying to say is, why are people pissed off about fascism now? We've been a fascist country since December 23rd, 1913. They passed, look that up. That was the Federal Reserve Act was passed in the middle of the night before Christmas Eve. It's a fascist country, and that ain't new. So, and don't give me this crap that anybody slightly right of extreme left is a fascist, because it's nonsense. It's BS. That's fascism in and of itself, to say that. Let's see. Oh, okay. Let's talk about monuments. There's been a big deal about monuments lately. So, you get people protesting, vandalizing monuments of General Lee. And then you get, free speech groups clashing with Antifa groups. You can be free speech without being a Nazi. Are you aware of that? The guy at that Charlottesville protest with the Nazi flag has been shown to be an agent provocateur, probably FBI, maybe CIA, one of those alphabet soup agencies. He's all over the place. I've also seen reports of people saying that, the Nazis and the Antifas getting off the same buses. Anyways, I'm getting sidetracked again here. Apologize. You got these monuments to people. I'll tell you what I think about getting rid of them. I don't really care. I don't get heartburn over getting rid of a General Lee monument. And I'll tell you why. When the Soviet Union broke up, Eastern European countries just gutted the whole joint of Lenin statues. And I'm totally okay with that. I think we should get some of those Eastern Europeans to Seattle, get rid of that Lenin statue. I don't know if you're aware of this, but there's a mall in Seattle's got a gigantic Lenin statue. I don't know how he got there or why people haven't, raised a fuss over that. But there is one. Makes no sense. Anyways, people want to get rid of Confederate statues. Fine, whatever. I think their logic is a little silly sometimes. Well, they're the losers. You don't have monuments to the losers. They're traitors. Oh, you can't have monuments to the traitors. Well, a couple of things there. The building monuments to the loser is an old practice. I'm trying to remember the names and I can't. The Romans or somebody laid the beat down on somebody and they erected a bunch of statues in that guy's honor because he was such a formidable opposing force. And I mean, it's really a pat yourself on the back thing. Honestly, it's a man. Look at how good this guy was, but we were even better. So there's that. This whole traitors nonsense. Well, there's a definition for a traitor. There's a definition for things like treason. Just like there's a definition for fascism. People ought to look them up. It'd be nice if they did, because they generally don't apply. And I'll tell you what, those same people that are complaining about General Lee and the Confederates being traitors, they're not saying that about the people who want California to secede from the Union, are they? Those are the people that want that to actually go through, which is silly. You're silly, folks. But the news about this whole monuments and statues business is that Richmond, Virginia is going to build a monument to Nat Turner. Who was Nat Turner? Well, he was a slave and he led a rebellion, a bloody rebellion. And I would be totally down with that, except for a couple of things. I'll give you a little clip from this article, and then 32 minutes, not too bad. I'll tell you what, I'm gonna give you a clip from this article, little snippet. It's not a clip if I'm just reading a quote. I'm gonna quote this article, and then I think I'm gonna take off, have myself a nice evening, settle down a little bit. This article quotes a guy, Charles Withers, a commission member from Roanoke, who pushed for Turner's inclusion. He says, if nothing else, he's the bravest black man in that era. I can respect that. He says, it's problematic for me as a black man in modern day society to stand up sometimes. I can't imagine the courage that Nat Turner had, and I can respect that. I'm absolutely opposed to slavery and racism. I think it's a bunch of BS, and I'm glad it's over, the racism in America. We've still got a lot to work to do on... Wait, did I say the racism was over? I meant the slavery. We still got a lot of work to do on the racism, I think. But, here we go. Making the case against Turner's inclusion, Laura Nett Lee, a professor at the University of Richmond and the founding curator of African American history at the Virginia Historical Society, said women and children were among the roughly 60 people killed before Turner, a preacher who believed God wanted him to lead slaves against their white owners, was caught and executed. The rest of the revolt was a crackdown on African Americans who had no part in the insurrection, Lee said. So it's just disingenuous, You've got, and here's something I meant to preface this with, is you've got this swing of a pendulum effect, right? Pendulum goes one way, extreme. It swings just as extreme the other direction. That's how you get the great orange one in what is arguably maybe the most powerful position in the world. Well, that and the fact that the opposition there was just a worse candidate. God, she was just terrible. Anyways, you got this pendulum effect. You pull and pull and pull it one direction, it's going to swing back just as far to the other side. And it's going to be worse. That's why we have checks and balances in government. That's why, having these supermajorities are not really that great, because they're just going to get worse the other way around. And it's the same thing with these monuments. You want to take down General Lee? Fine. I don't care. But the problem is you're going to replace it with a guy that killed women and children? I don't dig that at all either. So that's that's how I feel about that. And it's getting a little late. Um, I appreciate anyone who's been here listening. I promise I will get better. I'm going to keep on doing this. Try to do it weekly to start out, get in the swing of things like a pendulum. Bad joke. Sorry. And I hope you'll. I won't see you. I hope you see me next time on Informed Discretion with me, Stephen Hill. Take care, folks.